Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 1:30. The Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation now convenes this public hearing. Public hearing notices were given to the media. First notice on September 29, 2017. Second notice on Wednesday, October 4th, 2017. For the record, today is Monday, October 9, 2017, and the time is now 1:30. The committee will hear and accept testimonies, both oral and written, on the following. Bill 179-34, as introduced by myself and co-sponsored by Senator Dennis Rodriguez, an act to add a new Chapter 53 to Division 2, Title 11 of Guam Code Annotated, relative to the creation of the Guam Qualified Domestic Plan Trust Act, to regulate the establishment of Qualified Domestic Plan Trust Act, and to regulate the establishment of qualified pension, project sharing, and stock bonus plans by domestic corporation. I have several individuals that have signed up in support and against, or opposed. If I would have, let me see, we have John David. Would you please come forward, sir? We have Mr. Logan. We have Mr. Victor Perez. For oral, okay. We have, let's see, Oscar Miyashita. He's not here? Okay, okay, you got his testimony. We also have John Ujoa. Are you here? Sir, you signed up opposed? Please, have a seat. I'm trying to fill the panel, okay? So I'm going to call the names up, whoever's listed. Do you have anybody else signed up? Joanne? Anybody else? Oh, okay. So you're in support. Okay. We'll give it about 10 seconds and see if there's anybody else so we can fill up the table there, and everybody can speak one time, and if nobody else is going to speak, then we move on. Okay, we have Sandra Makir. If we can get her to. Is Sandra coming in? Come forward, because you wanted to provide a oral testimony, ma'am? No. Okay, we'll begin the testimony. The conduct of this public hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying will recognize in the order of the sign-in. We'll start with you, Mr. John. Written testimony may be read. Lengthy written testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide our legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony shall be confined to the substance of the hearing. Persons will be allowed to present oral testimony only once. Once you are done, you may be asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony, as may be desired. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You please state your name for the record. We'll now begin the testimony. We will start with Mr. David John, followed by Mr. Logan, and then followed by, let me see, Oscar? You're Oscar? No. You're John Ujoa. Okay, followed by you. And then you'll be followed by Sandra. And your name, ma'am, is? Okay, there. You're going to give me the list. She signed it? I know, I understand. And you're Flo Martinez. Okay, and you basically be the last person. Okay, and everybody else, I do have you listed as either in support or opposing. And it will be recorded as such, okay? Unless you want me to read your names, I have no problem doing that. I'd like to thank Senator Will Castro for joining me here. Mr. John, we will start with you.
Great, thank you. Chairman, Senator Castro. My name is David John. I'm president of ASC Trust Corporation. We're a local retirement management company. I'm here today in support of Bill 17934, an act to add new Chapter 53 to the Guam Code Annotated relative to the creation of the Guam Qualified Domestic Plan Trust Act. A bit of background. Over the past decade, an increasing number of Guam domestic corporations and government entities have set up qualified defined contribution plans such as 401ks, 401as, 457 plans to benefit their employees' employment. The employees of these plans are Guam taxpayers under the Guam Territorial Income Tax as established by Section 31 of the Organic Act of Guam. Most contributions to these plans are on a pre-Guam territorial income tax basis, meaning the contributions are made before the employee is withheld for income tax, which results in less taxes coming into the island's treasury at the time of deduction. While the reduced tax collection at the time of contribution is modeled in the code to be made up when the taxpayer receives a distribution from the plan in the form of a 1099-R income, many plan sponsors currently maintain a trust with U.S. CITES, resulting in tax withholdings being paid to the IRS instead of the Guam Department of Revenue and Taxation. To make matters worse for Guam tax collections, U.S. trusts issue 1099-Rs to the individual taking the distribution, and they often owe less than the amount paid to the IRS, resulting in DRT paying refunds on money they never received. With assets in these plans exceeding $1 billion and growing, this practice has cost the government millions of dollars in lost tax revenue over the last decade. It should be noted that this is not a new issue. In 2008, while working on a white paper for the buildup, Don Clark and myself from our office met with John Camacho and Art Alagan of DRT to better understand how they were receiving tax payments from off-island managed plans. When it was discovered that they were not receiving payments, DRT issued letters to domestic sponsors reminding them of the responsibilities as plan trustees or administrators. The letter stated, you need to pay your withholding to the Treasury of Guam, you need to attach a Form 500, you need to do this quarterly on a Form W1, report all retirement plan distributions to Guam DRT on Forms 1099-R and 1096, and the letter offered plans not in compliance to forgo penalties and interest if they responded by the end of that year. Hello, Senator. Sorry, you came in. So they had come up with a mechanism that they thought would, take care of this. However, several plan administrators, several plans responded favorable to DRT's instructions, set up Guam trusts, and began paying withholdings. However, several stateside providers came out against DRT's letter on the ground that U.S. CITES trusts were not qualified to pay taxes directly to the IRS. So a Guam trust can pay that, but under the rules of the U.S. CITES trust, it's been established that they cannot pay directly to rev and tax. They can only pay to the IRS. So in an effort to resolve this situation, a group, to include my company, ASC Trust Corporation, hired Carl Smith to approach the U.S. Treasury for guidance. It got bigger than Guam got into. It was the whole, an act was formed, an advisory committee on tax. An act was formed to take a look at this. In June 2019, the U.S. Treasury had provided some recommendations on how to solve this. In the recommendations, they stated Guam CITES Trust should continue to pay tax withholdings directly, and U.S. CITES Trust could pay directly to the IRS. However, a system should be appropriated to come up with a memorandum of understanding so that Guam would ultimately get this tax. So no one questioned that this is Guam tax. It was just how do we get it here? In December of 2009, DRT issued instructions to plan administrators. I've given you a copy of that. And in that letter they said is, give us file a plan document with the Department of Revenue Taxation, file a Form 50 or Form 1096 annually for the Guam participants, and DRT will work with the IRS to get the money. So what they said to the off-island providers was, we get it, you can't pay direct, go ahead and continue paying, give us copies of the forms, we need copies of your plan documents to know you exist so that we can be monitoring this, and then we'll work to get that money paid to us. Even though the provisions would delay payments to DRT by 16 to 18 months, DRT was open to providing a workaround for these stateside trusts. I want you to think about this. Even though the tax is clearly owed to DRT, DRT allowed U.S. trusts to pay taxes to the IRS and then ask for the forms. That's all they asked for. Just give us copies of the forms so we can go track down the money. Yet no takers. 5 years later, when Senator Ben Pangilinan determined that, with the exception of Great West, who handled the Guam DC plan, that no stateside provider was in compliance, he authored Bill 320-32 to address tax payments. While the bill created a more robust set of tools for DRT to identify and track domestic sponsored DC plans, it attempted to directly regulate U.S. trust companies, so the bill did not go forward. So it overstepped what I think everyone agrees to. It was trying to tell stateside trust companies how to run their business. Since this time, DRT has attempted to create a solution through their executive oversight without success in collection of revenues. I want to stress DRT has offered several iterations of bills and administrative relief to solve this problem, always focused on a balanced treatment of providers, participants, and plan providers, and yet providers fail to pay their tax withholdings or give forms so that DRT can track it down. And even if DRT were able to find a workaround solution, is it really fair that taxpayers at Guam, that off-island trusts are allowed to essentially pay their taxes 6 to 8 months later? If I tried that as a business owner with my withholding tax, I don't think it would end too well. Bill 17934 will require Guam domestic sponsors to establish Guam domestic trusts and register their planned trusts with the Department of Revenue and Taxation in order to become eligible to contribute to plans on a pre-Guam territorial income tax basis. I want to stress that the entire foundation of this bill is to require plan sponsors to demonstrate that they have the ability to pay taxes directly to Guam in the future in order to get tax deductions today. That's it. I mean, there's a couple other things with it, 3 years, we'll get into that. But really, it's just saying is, in order for you to make contributions on a pre-tax basis going forward, you need to demonstrate that you have the capabilities of paying directly to DRT. And that would be in the form of a Guam Situs trust. The logic of the structure is as follows. IRS defines a qualified trust under 26 U.S. Code 401A as a trust created or organized in the United States. The Guam Territorial Income Tax is established by Section 31 of the Organic Act Guam as amended 48 U.S.C. 142 1I. The GTIT is a mirror of the Internal Revenue Codes of 1986. And incorporates the income tax provision of the IRC, except where those provisions are manifestly inapplicable or incompatible with the intent of Section 31. In effect, Section 1 of the IRC applies to the Guam taxpayers as Section 1 of GTIT. Sorry, I know you know this, but I'm just saying it for the record, and so on. So the GTIT is the provisions here, not the IRC. Thus, the applicable provisions of the IRC shall read to substitute Guam for the United States. For this purpose, a qualifying trust for a Guam domestic sponsor is a trust created or organized on Guam. Further, in applying the GTIT, a corporation organized in Guam is domestic, while a corporation organized elsewhere is foreign. For this purposes, trusts organized outside of Guam are recognized as foreign, and trusts organized on Guam are recognized as domestic. I want to stress there's multiple trust options for plans to utilize. They can hire a local trust company. They can establish a local paying trust agent, something ASC does even though we're a trust company. They can establish a trust with an individual Guam resident or provide or they can register as a Guam trust company. We have some of the greatest laws out there for that. To clarify, this bill does not change the IRC in any way or form and does not attempt to regulate the U.S. Department of Labor or ERISA. It simply reiterates the intention of the GTIT Mirror Code. Additionally, unlike the past effort to legislate payments sponsored by Senator Pangilinan, this bill does not regulate U.S. trust companies in any way. It requires Guam domestic plan sponsors to establish a Guam trust for their plan in order to receive qualifying tax deductions. So it's strictly on the front end, qualifying what you need to do in order for that deduction to hold up with your taxes. The bill doesn't disqualify existing plans. If a Guam organization wants to sponsor a plan without a Guam trust, they certainly can. They just won't get deductions from GTIT. This is really what GTI says now. It's basically, it's just reiterating what's there. Further, there's logic why the bill requires existing plans that have not been paying taxes to refile the last 3 years. Under tax laws, employers can refile the last 3 years and request refunds. The 3-year tax refiling will allow DRT an attempt to get 3 years more of refunds. It should be stressed that since these plans did not file with DRT after DRT requested that they go back and do it in 2008, they've technically never filed. If DRT wanted to be punitive, they could have ground to go after plans for longer than 3 years, and these plans would not be allowed to refund refund requests for years past the 3 years. So it's not punitive at all. It should be noted that the goal of this bill is not to penalize sponsors for the past, but to get a system in place to assure the Treasury of Guam receives taxes that are rightfully theirs, as well as create tools to incentivize sponsors to get to the table. Lastly, regarding filing fees, the bill has a one-time filing fee to the DRT to review plan trust documents to assure the structure of these trusts will result in taxes being paid to Guam. And the way it's structured is it's $500 for a plan document that's written just for that plan, which are your big plans. And then for the smaller plans, they use things called prototypes, where you have 90% of the plans the same document, and then you have a few changes for each plan. Under that arrangement, you'd pay a one-time $500 fee for your prototype document, and then each plan after that would be on the hook for $100. As a plan sponsor, if you don't want to charge us that money, we'd be happy not to pay it. But I do believe, as a board member of GITA, and I watch all the things that get thrown on GITA, all these mandates we have to do, and we aren't getting paid for it. I think there should be some sort of a fee for DRT. Again, won't push that. In summary, this issue has been around for over 10 years. It's becoming more and more expensive as assets grow in plans. Enough is enough. If a provider wants to work in Guam, they're welcome, but they must make sure they pay their taxes to the Treasury of Guam and pay that tax on time. Further, I'm confident the taxpayers of Guam that are participants in these plans in question want their hard-earned taxes to be paid to the government that runs their schools, hospital, and police force. Bill 17934 is a simple and easy-to-understand solution to a problem that will eventually cost the taxpayers of Guam millions annually. It is actionable and easy for plan sponsors to implement, with the only change in plans not currently in compliance being the situs of their trust, a one-time filing fee, and refiling of their last 3 years of tax returns in an effort for DRT to claw back some of the taxes paid to the IRS. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. For the folks on the panel, even though I said 5 minutes, don't worry, I will not stop you if you go beyond 5. As you noticed, Mr. John was quite lengthy.
Sorry.
I'd like to also recognize Senator Spaldon has joined us today. We will now begin with Mr. Art Ilagan. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Agustin, Senator Castro, Senator Espaldon. My name is Art Ilagan. I am the Banking and Insurance Commissioner and former Director for the Department of Revenue and Taxation. I have been employed at the department since 1980. I am here to testify in favor of Bill 179-34 for 2 reasons. The first reason is for taxation. In 1950, the Organic Act authorized the government of Guam to administer its own tax system under the Guam Territorial Income Tax Code. This system is totally different, is a totally different taxing jurisdiction from the IRS. Section 936 of the Internal Revenue Code authorizes Guam to mirror the code. This means that where the code mentions United States, you replace it with Guam. Vice versa. If the IRC mentions Guam, it shall be replaced with the United States. Section 30 is a mechanism for the federal government to cover over all military and civil service withholdings, fees paid to the federal government such as passport fees, and Section 5074 over to Guam. All private contractors with the military or any non-military business doing business in Guam will not be covered under Section 30. My experience with the federal government, they will not cover over non-military organizations or businesses of Guam that erroneously filed with IRS. The procedure is for that business to file an amended return to the IRS and that business to file that return properly to Guam. This law and procedure also applies to all pension funds businesses in Guam. Any pension plans being operated in Guam should file that portion of income made in Guam to Guam. When pension plans files and pays their return to IRS, Guam is losing out from receiving its fair share of taxes. The leakage is difficult to determine when the pension plan taxes or the plans itself are not filed in Guam. The second reason for my support of Bill 179-34 is for the protection of our residents. Currently, Guam taxpayers are making large contributions to trusts with no relations to the government of Guam. We do not allow this for banking or insurance companies for a reason. As assets and pension plans grows, having knowledge of the trust operations or individual trustees will add an additional layer of protection to our citizens. This requirement does not preempt the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, ERISA, from applying. ERISA is a federal law that sets minimum standards for the most voluntarily established pensions and health plans in private industries to provide protection for individuals in this plan. If this bill is passed, Guam will be in a better position to protect our residents from fraudulent or rogue pension plans operators. Accordingly, the department will capture the revenue leakages that escape our government through the department's tax clearance procedures. I have in the past, as a director, given directives to these trust plans which were not adhered to. So with this is why I support this bill. These pension plans must be recognized by Guam. It must be at least be looked at so that we would know who they are, who their employees are, who they're selling to, so that when issues come up, like somebody took their money and they ran and we don't know who to go to, enforcement of these pension plans should be enforced and is at presently very weak. Therefore, I support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We'll move to John.
Hafiday Senators, Senator Espadon, Senator San Agustin, Senator Castro, thank you for hearing what we have to say. Regards to Bill 179, my name is John Ujoa. I'm representing the local Guam chapter of the National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors. We are NAFA Marianas. NAFA Marianas is the industry association, so for insurance and financial advisors, you can imagine that covers dozens of insurance companies and investment advisor companies who are licensed and regulated by the federal government. And our organizations represent thousands, tens of thousands of retirement plan savers. Our organizations represent many business owners and corporations on island. So I do want to stress the fact that we feel that Bill 179 in plain language violates many federal laws and agencies and regulations. There's quite a handful that we can get into. For example, there's a violation of U.S. antitrust legislation by creating a monopoly. The intent of this bill is to force Guam businesses and organizations that offer qualified pension, such as 401k, 403b, 457, and defined benefit, profit sharing and stock bonus plans, to hold their assets in a Guam-based trust. All businesses, organizations, and public and private participants of a retirement plan will lose their right to choose a plan provider, a separate custodian, a separate third-party administrator, and a separate licensed financial advisor. Having a choice allows you to avoid conflicts of interest by all-in-one providers who perform all fiduciary tasks required of retirement plans without the proper checks and balances. This bill attempts to force plan participants to switch to a Guam-based trust or provider. Section 411A11 of the Internal Revenue Code prevents a plan from forcing a distribution on a plan participant prior to the time the participant attains normal retirement age at age 62. In general, if the present value of any non-forfeitable accrued benefit exceeds $5,000, a plan must provide that such benefit may not be distributed without the consent of the participant. And I forgot to say that's a quote from the Internal Revenue Code. In order to be a Guam-based trust, there is a capital investment that is required. For this reason, current U.S.-based trusts will cease service to Guam residents. I believe that's a $10 million capital investment. I do need to verify that figure. Currently, there's only one Guam-based trust company that provides retirement plan services. Therefore, in violation of U.S. antitrust legislation, you cannot legislate into a monopoly or duopoly if there happens to be one other provider. Secondly, Guam does not have the legal authority to alter the Mirror Code, and that's according to the Internal Revenue Code, Section 7654E. Qualified plans are governed by the IRS, the United States Department of Labor, the United States Department of Labor Fiduciary Rule, the ERISA Act, which is the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974, and other federal laws and agencies. ERISA is a federal law enforced by the U.S. Department of Labor, and that sets minimum standards for established pension and health plans in private industries to provide protection for individuals in these plans. The IRS has the sole legal authority to qualify or disqualify a retirement plan. So one more time, if there's existing retirement plans or if there's plans that want to start up and become a new plan, only the IRS has the legal authority to give it tax qualified status. This bill attempts to usurp IRS authority by granting Guam Department of Revenue Tax the power to qualify all new and existing retirement plans, disqualify all existing retirement plans, define corporations organized outside of Guam as foreign entities, and that includes U.S. corporations, halt on accepting employee retirement contribution deductions or employer contributions, cease accepting individual Guam W-2 retirement contribution deductions, cease accepting corporate retirement plan employer contributions issued by Guam businesses and organizations, penalize existing retirement plans that have already been qualified by the IRS by charging arbitrary filing fees, penalize non-compliant businesses, organizations, public and private participants of a retirement plan by forcing them to amend their tax returns for the previous 3 years and pay past due taxes, penalties, and interest. Imagine hundreds of businesses and organizations, and imagine tens of thousands of retirement plan participants having to amend their last 3 years of taxes. That's not a good outcome. Guam cannot alter the Mirror Code through local legislation, but it may be able to adopt administrative rules and regulations needed to implement the Mirror Code locally, provided such regulations are not inconsistent with U.S. regulations under IRC Section 7654E. This bill violates Section 401A and 501A of the IRC. Quote, Section 401A of the Internal Revenue Code states that the trust must be maintained for the exclusive benefit of the employees and their beneficiaries. Section 401A of the Code sets out the requirement that a trust must satisfy in order to qualify for favorable tax treatment. When a trust is qualified under Section 401A, it obtains its exemption from income tax under Code Section 501A. Guam does not have the power to change the rules on GTIT withholding. And I want to reference C case Guam versus Coaster 362 F2D 248. Third point. Purpose of Bill 179, we agree with the purpose. We do agree with having to increase Section 30 tax revenues. We do agree, we do support any increase of revenues to Gov Guam for the much needed issues plaguing our island as far as budget shortfalls, needing money for Department of Education, needing money for roads and GMH. We are in support of those same needs. However, the solution to collecting withholding taxes from Guam taxpayers is already addressed in the Section 30 process. And in fact, the solution is Bill 65-4, which thankfully this legislature unanimously approved last week, I believe. So Section 30 stipulates the appropriate mechanism for Guam to recover taxes collected by the IRS. However, there's no mechanism in reverse. There's no mechanism for the IRS to collect withholding taxes from Guam residents that move to the U.S. mainland and file their taxes, or for Guam companies doing business on the mainland or another U.S. jurisdiction. So, by redirecting the taxes from IRS to Guam, that places Guam in a direct violation of the IRS. We don't want to tangle with the IRS or the federal government. We know that Guam never gets good outcomes when that happens. We feel it's better to work within the heavily regulated and heavily thought out existing federal system. So in summary, this bill will have severe legal and financial consequences to Guam because it directly violates numerous federal laws and agencies' regulations. I'll repeat them. The IRS, the United States Department of Labor, ERISA, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Sherman Act of 1890, the Federal Trade Commission Act, which created the FTC, the Clayton Act, and the Department of Justice. This will cause the IRS, should we go down this path, this will cause the IRS to revoke the qualified status of existing retirement plans, causing severe legal and financial harm to public and private retirement participants and the businesses that sponsor these retirement plans. In addition, going forward, many business and organizations may be discouraged from setting up new retirement plans due to the duplicate and ambiguous regulations and fees. In addition, a majority of Guam workers will not have a vehicle for retirement savings, resulting in extreme financial hardship in old age. They'll be relying on social programs that are severely underfunded. Again, Guam does not have the power to change the rules on GTIT withholding, according to the case Guam versus Coaster 362 F2D 248. In conclusion, the IRS has the sole legal authority to grant qualified status to retirement plans. The IRS has the sole legal authority to accept W-2 deductions and retirement plan contributions from employers and employees. Neither GTIT, the Organic Act, DRT, or the government of Guam should attempt to usurp the IRS authority. There are various federal laws, regulations, and enforcement agencies that this bill violates, and we support Bill 65 because we know that it addresses the need to get more tax revenue through the Section 30 process. So we're glad that Bill 65 was unanimously voted on. We hope it ultimately ends up a law, and when that happens, the need for this will be a moot point. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Sandra, do you want to speak, or do you look like you have the same copy in front of you, but okay?
I'll speak, thank you. So I'm coming in as an individual that has been a part of what's called a stock market game. And I have been a volunteer in educating students of public and private school in an interactive game that teaches children about saving and investing. And so over the 19 years that I have been doing this, it encourages me because these children, last year we had over 200 teams come out. Have you heard of the stock market game? It's amazing. 200 teams came out from public and private schools. And my passion to have these children become investors is really important to me. And that's why I have been volunteering that long. And the reason why I come out here to oppose the Bill 179 is because what is happening here is making investing very complicated for not only investors, but for businesses that provide retirement plans. And like John was saying, that when you have lack of competition, so I just want to reiterate, there are local companies that are being affected here. Flo Martinez is the president of a local investment firm. We work for also local investment firm with local people working and paying taxes here that are being affected. This is not a U.S. custodian issue, it's a local issue. Local firms that have businesses here are being affected by this bill. And so as someone that's been an advocate for investors, this is going to be a detriment to the future investors. And the reason why is because anytime there is a lack of competition where we prevent investors from having a choice to invest their money, what happens is when that choice becomes very small or only one choice, what happens is quality goes down and prices go up. And I can tell you this bill makes for even businesses, it's going to discourage them for actually providing their employees with a retirement fund plan because it's going to get really complicated for those businesses and it's going to get really costly. And all of this, I believe, like we were talking about, is it's already getting the money back from the IRS. There's already a mechanism. It's through the Section 30 process. So all of this fees and more regulation is not necessary when we already have a mechanism to collect those fees. So the question is, why do we have this bill? What's the heart of the bill when we already have a mechanism and it's quite simple to do? So I don't believe that this bill is good for the people of Guam, and it's definitely not good for local businesses and the people who have shareholders with investment companies here. It's definitely not good for us either. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Flo.
Thank you, Senator Agustin. Good afternoon, Senator Castro, Senator Espaldon. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon at your wonderful, beautiful new legislature, the pride of our island. It's awesome. My name is Flo Martinez. I'm the president of Advisors Unlimited, and I'm here today to oppose Bill 179. I see that the bill could, if passed, will be extremely disruptive and very discouraging for a great number of our constituents. To explain this further, and to emphasize what the two previous speakers had presented, I'm going to ask you to think of this situation. I have 4 banks in my mind right now, local banks or branches from off-island. Pentagon Federal Credit Union, Bank of Guam, Bank of Hawaii, Personal Finance. I'm going to ask you to choose one of those banks. Let's say you have a situation in which you must eliminate 3. Okay, so in your mind, choose the one. What did you come up with? Was it an easy decision? What did you have to give up? What did you have to sacrifice? What are the repercussions for the customers of the banks that you eliminated? As we know, banks will offer similar services, checking, savings, loans, and then some banks are unique. Use of technology, fees may be different. What else is different? Quality of service. You know, this is also true for trust companies. You have similarities in the services that they provide, administration and management of retirement plans. And yes, there are also differences that will set them apart. Definitely the fees. Use of technology, definitely, we see that. There are major differences in that area. What else? Quality of service. If you pass Bill 179, I think we will be sacrificing too much for a great number of our local people, our Guam residents. Imagine pushing all those customers from the 3 banks that you eliminated and convincing them that the one bank that you choose to be the only bank on Guam because they satisfy all the rules and all the regulations. Imagine how those customers that have to leave the 3 banks, how do they feel? Are they willing? Are they happy? Are they satisfied? So when you go through your notes, your knowledge, your experience in your decision for the bills, I ask you to think about, you know, this little simple exercise. And I use this because perhaps we in the industry, we understand certain jargon. You as lawmakers, you understand the language. But people need to know that when we pass Bill 179, we will be eliminating, I would say, a minimum of a dozen US-based trusts. When we do that, I'm only aware of one trust company that will be in existence. When we have just one provider, one vendor, one business providing this thing that everybody wants, retirement, can you imagine what the situation would be for that company? Will they have an upper hand in certain situations? Probably so. It'll be natural for them to have control over certain things because they're the only game in town. September 30, we had a deadline for GovGuam employees to choose between continuing to participate with their defined contribution plan or switching to the new DB 1.75. Although I was against that bill that created DB 1.75, of course it passed. And I understand the purpose or the intent you lawmakers had in passing that bill and providing the new retirement plan or the new defined benefit plan. You wanted to give employees an option. You wanted to provide a solution to what was dire for too many GovGuam employees. GovGuam employees are fortunate in that they had that option. Today, I'm going to ask you to think about the rest of the constituents of our island, and that is the employees in the private sector. When you pass Bill 179, you reduce their options greatly. You minimize it from 100% to 1% as far as where they can go, who they can go to, and choosing between many. You will eliminate that. And is that the best thing to do for our people? I don't think so. I've been fortunate to have been in this business for the past 28 years. I've dealt with so many different kinds of retirement plans for different people, both public, private, different sizes of plans for one person, for 100 people. Not one, I could not find one trust company that will satisfy all the needs and objectives of all my clients. I might have found one great company that I love, but for some reason I could not put that client with that company because the client was different. The employees, the objectives were different. The type of retirement plan was different. So I found through the years that I had to affiliate myself with many different trust companies. What we should be doing as industry professionals, as lawmakers, as leaders of our island, is to provide all the different vehicles, the different solutions. We should cater to the needs of our people, not fit them into this one, because this is the only one available. I think that concludes my presentation.
Thank you,
Again,
Flo.
thank you.
All right. Did you want to speak? I beg your pardon? Yes, and state your name because I don't have you signed up, so I wanted to make sure we got you signed up.
Yes, I signed up outside.
Okay.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, appreciate you allowing me an opportunity to also speak. My name is Don Clark, and I'm also with ASC Trust Corporation. And as David may have mentioned, that we do manage most of the retirement plans here on island. The issue that we want, the reason why we like this bill, of course, is because it makes sure that withholding taxes are paid properly to the jurisdiction where it goes. This is Guam-sourced income. So Guam-sourced income, the taxes should be paid to Guam. Puerto Rico has done this already. Back in 2004, already passed laws that trusts for retirement plans have to be set up in Puerto Rico. They have separate withholding tax filing requirements, so that withholding tax that is withheld from retirement plans are paid to Puerto Rico. The laws here do the same thing. Laws in Sinai do the same thing. American Samoa, Virgin Islands. So the IRS understands this. The IRS says plans here in Guam are qualified. Plans in the Northern Mariana Islands are qualified. People are allowed to transfer money between Guam and the mainland U.S. and vice versa and keep their money qualified. So the laws are there. This doesn't change that. It doesn't change anything that's there. It just allows the Department of Revenue and Taxation a mechanism to make sure that they can see which are these companies that have retirement plans and to make sure that the withholding tax is paid correctly. Now, I'm not going to go into Section 30 if that is a mechanism and a method of recovering that money. I'll leave that up to Department of Revenue and Taxation, but they also have said that that is not the proper mechanism. So where are they going to be able to capture the millions, hundreds of millions of withholding tax that is being paid to the IRS? Then Puerto Rico has put these laws in place so that they can capture that. Now, the IRS, again, we have a mirror code right now, and anything that we do for our clients that normally would be done with the Internal Revenue Service is done with Department of Revenue and Taxation. And we've had numerous Department of Labor audits. We've had IRS audits, all of them. When we would tell them that the taxes are being paid to Guam, and if there are any issues where there are penalties that normally are paid to the IRS, and that those penalties are being paid to the Department of Revenue and Taxation, they have no issue with that. In fact, that is the correct method in which this is supposed to take place. So the laws already are in place. The IRS and the territories have an understanding as to how these taxes are to be collected and who owns the money that is there. So all that this does is strengthen that. Now, as far as competition goes or business opportunities, I beg to differ with the others that have given testimony. This opens the door for opportunity. Now, all the banks at one point, and they probably still have it within their charter, are allowed to offer trust services. Some banks are currently doing that right now. So the opportunity already is there for companies that use off-island trust companies to be able to give the local businesses, if that's an issue they have, that gives the local businesses that business opportunity. And it will probably create more opportunity. The banks that have stopped providing trust services, I have a feeling they're going to open those things back up again because now they know that there's business there. They have other companies such as ASC that may wish to get into the trust business as well. So I think it does the opposite than discourages opportunities of business here. I think it opens it up as well. And it's very easy to do. There are companies. Example, if I may give, is Bank of Hawaii. Their participants are participating in a plan that they have in Hawaii. But Bank of Hawaii recognized that the taxes for withholding has to be paid to Guam, and they are doing that. Now, we manage plans for, like we said, 300-plus retirement plans out here. We have no problem making sure that the withholding is paid correctly to the proper agency, which is the Department of Revenue and Taxation. So other companies that choose an off-island trustee, that choose to have an administrator off-island who is not willing to follow the laws here and is unable to make sure that the taxes that are withheld are paid to the proper authority, which is here in Guam, and we also include Sinai in that as well, is really no excuse. They should be following the law They should, and it can easily be set up so that the withholding taxes are remitted correctly. And so the law just helps revenue and taxation be able to have a better handle and a better control of that. You know, the insurance industry law was passed many, many years ago that said if you want to sell life insurance out here, you have to have representation here in Guam. You know, I cannot call a mainland company in the U.S. as far I might be wrong, but my understanding is that I cannot call a company in the U.S. and buy my life insurance from them if they do not have representation here on Guam, because that's the law. Did that deter competition? Did it hurt? No, it helped the insurance industry here in Guam. This does the same thing. And you know, there are, if companies out there want to offer trust services, they're more than welcome to come to Guam and be able to do that, as long as they follow the laws, do the steps that are required under the regulations set forth by the Banking and Insurance Commission and the laws here in Guam to be able to do that. So all in all, it really is a win-win for the people here in Guam. You know, Mr. Ilagan brought up a good point. It's a way of making sure that the trust companies and the brokers and other people that offer investments are identified, so that they have means of being able to track them and see if any of them are doing anything wrong in their fiduciary responsibilities or in their responsibilities towards their clients. And it's a way to, I think, open up the business and offer more trust services. It's a way for Gov Guam to be able to make sure they collect rightfully the withholding tax that is for Guam-sourced income. And you know, it's something that should have been done many, many years ago. So it's good that finally this law is coming forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Castro, do you have anything you want to? None? Senator Spaldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, a couple things. And Mr. Chair, first and foremost, there are a couple of testimonies that were read, and if you could just ask that those be submitted to the committee so we can actually take a look at it. This is not one of those cut and dry issues. I hear both sides. I really do. And almost as a disclaimer up front, Mr. John, I mean, I walked in when you were already giving your testimony. You spoke very quickly, and for those of us who are perhaps not as well versed in the topic matter that you were talking about, I would have to at least read that testimony several times over, maybe even listen to this tape to understand the depth of your analysis. There are counterpoints, of course, from several others who have provided testimony, and of course they have to be given the due consideration as well. Mr. Chair, I'm not really sure this is ripe yet to go forward, especially, like I said, for some of us, probably most of us in the body who are not as versed in this industry to really understand the ramifications of this policy call. I highly respect, of course, Mr. Ilagan's testimony, just having been at Revenue Tax and a lot of the guidance that he's provided this body throughout the years and some of his own thoughts. But that doesn't eliminate the concerns that others who are opposed to this bill, you know, it doesn't eliminate their concerns, because one testimony, of course, is right, is like, what do you do about the existing companies who are here providing those kind of services? Do you just eliminate them in favor of? Mr. John, looks like you're ready to say something.
You mentioned my name, so I'd like to really respond really quick.
Well, I mentioned your name because you spoke very quickly, and it was hard to digest the very intricate and very complicated analysis and subject matter that you were talking to. And I just made mention of your name because I would have loved to. Again, there were others on this panel who spoke a little bit more slowly. It was easier to digest in my own mind. And again, I need to revisit perhaps all that you said, whether I'd have to listen to your testimony over again several times or perhaps even read your testimony. And that was the basis of raising your name. I mean, I highly respect, of course, your input because you've been in this industry. And like I said, to try to understand the analysis that you provided, I would have to really try to take it one step at a time. It's like somebody who's not familiar with the game of, I'll take myself, who's not familiar with the game of rugby. You could explain it real fast, I still wouldn't get it. I would probably have to watch it a couple of times, go step by step. Why are they doing that? Why are they doing this? And I think that's just one of those analogies from myself. I'm speaking solely for myself, to be able to really put forth at least some kind of argument on both sides, for both sides of the coin, in front of our other colleagues. We do have several new members, and even the old members may not even be versed. And that's one of the difficulties with this job. Everybody thinks it's a very simple job when it really isn't, because the task before us as lawmakers is that we don't deal with one subject matter. We actually deal, every time there's a bill that comes before us, it's actually a different subject matter from the last bill that we heard. And so sometimes we have to try to really understand the real, I guess, the very basic concepts behind what's being proposed and the industry as well as the ramifications. It might be clear in your minds, even those within the industry, but in our minds, it's not, because today we could be talking about financial investment firms and this topic matter. Tomorrow we could be talking about mass transit, and then the following day we'll be talking about airport related. So it's not a cut and dry one day, let's have this discussion and we know it all, and because we don't. And again, the mention was just to try to understand all the arguments that were made. Mr. Ulloa made some very good arguments, so did Ms. McKeever, in terms of now we have to really take a look at what the IRS code does say, because again, the arguments that were proffered by them would be, well, there may be a circumvention with probably some federal laws and that we would have to take a look at. And I'm just mentioning this to you because I just want to express my appreciation for all the testimony. I thought I was going to walk in here and everybody in here was going to be in favor of this bill, and I figure, okay, let's just hear all the great arguments, and come to find out that really there is a split in terms of some who definitely support this measure, and then the other half opposes this measure. And from our vantage point, when you have that kind of split, then you have to do definitely a deeper analysis of where is everybody coming from, and in the end, what is the best public policy going forward for the long-term good of our island. You and Mr. Clark make some good arguments about making sure that the tax monies are recovered by revenue tax. Again, along with Mr. Ilagan, you know, the plans must be recognized on Guam so that we can have better tracking of who's doing what, who's responsible to whom, and things like that. But again, that's one side only of the coin, right? The other side is the possible negative ramifications to others who are within the industry on this island, who also provide jobs and revenues to this government. And so it's not an easy task. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I agree, but you came in a little bit late. I summarized it in the beginning, not to be a smart aleck. But the key to this is the bill states that it has nothing to do with the actual plan documents. It has nothing to do with the RISA. All it's stating is you, if you're going to have a plan here, sponsor, not companies, not any of us, just plan sponsors, employers. If you're going to have a plan here, you need to show revenue tax that you have a trustee that's willing and able to pay the withholding tax that your employees have been granted not to pay in year one to revenue tax when that employee distributes. That's it. They're hiring trust companies that don't have that in their site. They can't do that. We found this out 10 years ago. and I agree with it. 10 years ago, this was found out. Reventax has offered multiple solutions over 10 years, and the industry, for the most part, outside the local trust companies in Great West and Bank of Hawaii, have just decided not to pay a tax that's due. We're a trust company, and I think a lot of this little nudging was made to look at ASC as some kind of monopoly. We're a trust company, and we're not our trust-paying agents in Guam. When I heard the thing about the U.S. Trust, I was sympathetic to that. I backed off on it because it's an issue. But that's why Reventax had allowed for just turn in your paperwork to us, show us who paid taxes from your plans, and we'll work with the IRS to get the money. They didn't do that. And then, if you look at it, we a couple of years ago separated our offerings, so we hired another trust company to be our paying agent. There's nothing that would preclude the off-island companies. They don't need to change vendors. They don't need to change providers. It's not anyone in this room that's going to be affected by this. You really think Asia Pacific's going to go out of business and retirements tomorrow? No, they're going to hire a local trust company. Where you're going to get additional, I think you should respond, Sandra. Where you're going to get additional work that's going to come into the island is companies that are in the States that really don't even have any clue that they're supposed to be doing this. Those are the ones that are really missing from the equation. So by having the statute on the books that would have a mechanism in place for Reventax to notify companies that aren't doing the tax payments locally, that would allow for the conversation to start with the plans. But it is not a costly endeavor to hire a local trust paying agent. Sorry, Sandy, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to get us back to this bill. Okay, so David, I totally understand the progression, but this bill is what we're talking about today. And this bill forces plan sponsors to have their trust services to a Guam-based trust. And that's the key. That's the issue. That's the problem. In order to have a Guam-based trust, you need a minimal capital requirement of $10 million. Now, let me tell you.
Wait, just on that. I'm a local
John,
trust company. I've never had $10 million.
Okay, so before.
Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just set the rules of engagement. Number one, as we address every one of you, no interruption. This is a specific. We called you, John. You spoke. Courtesy with Sandra, and we're going to go down. Because at the end of the day, like Senator Spadon said, this is not going to be settled today, trust me. This won't even go to the floor this month probably because of the issues you're bringing up. Okay, so Ms. Sandra, you're next. Okay.
And and please, I apologize if my understanding is incorrect, but I think there has to be more research. Before, there was a minimal capital requirement of $100,000 to have a Guam-based trust. What my understanding is today, it's $10 million. So something has changed on that capital minimum requirement. This causes a big issue. So this is not about withholding, getting the correct information, because there is a place to get information, but this is not it. This bill requires more regulation on an already regulated federal retirement plan. So on top of that, there's duplicate regulation, ambiguous regulation. On top of that, there's more fees. And then, but because if, like I said, if the intent is to collect revenue back from the IRS, we have that very simple process in place. And with even the bill 65-4? 65-4. Okay, -4. That's even emphasizing that we should go through that Section 30 process. But forcing all of the Guam plans to go with a Guam-based trust which causes a lot of complications. That's not the heart of this bill. If the heart of the bill is to raise money for revenue tax, we can do that very simply without having a lot more regulation and ambiguous, processes and fees. We can do it without all of that. So my question again is, what is the heart of this bill? It's not to raise more money for revenue tax, because we can do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you. No. Can you go ahead and turn off the mic? Senator Spalding, please continue.
I want to hear how we're going to raise revenues right now. We'll have that conversation another time. No, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been an educational experience for me today. I read the bill when it first was introduced. Not a subject matter expert. I came here to educate myself, and I'm getting an education. And I'm not the only one who's going to need this education. I believe there are several more of my colleagues who probably need to be better versed in this area to ask the right questions to get down to what the policy is going to be. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I heard the question. If everybody heard what Mr. Longan talked about, let me just emphasize, number one, I am a former criminal investigator for revenue and tax. One of the problems we dealt with people not registered on Guam. I asked that question earlier to Flo. All your plans, whatever business you're doing in Guam, are you registered? Mr. John, on your testimony, it's about the IRS. Sure, IRS got a bunch of regulations. Not everything is perfect. Even President Trump don't agree with a lot of the stuff there. A lot of the Congress people don't agree with it. What my concern is that if you're doing business on Guam, you should be registered on Guam. And when you're registered on Guam, then it makes it the government of Guam's responsibility to make sure that everybody's protected. Regardless if it's insurance, trust, it doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure it happens. Now, I will be calling you Mr. John. We're going to talk about your testimony because I've heard from John, David John. Now I want to call John and Joa. I want to hear what's going on. I want to be able to, because my responsibility is to reach out to my colleague and let them understand what we're trying to fix. If it was 10 years ago, if it was Senator Pangilinan that was trying to fix it, let me tell you something. And when you talk about banks, I deal with pretty much every bank you mentioned here. And I don't like any one of them really too much, because not every one of them will offer me a good deal. And I'm retired military, and I deal PenFed a lot. So when you want to talk, when you use that example, banks, wrong dude. I'll be 60. I dealt with banks for the past 40 years. So nothing new. But my concern is that if anybody's doing business on Guam, everybody's got to get registered. I don't care what kind of business you're doing. It's no different. Is that I think just recently, it's on the WhatsApp to all our folks. There's even a news about Amazon. Somebody's ripping off Amazon. Hey, what more now for the trust? If something would have happened to the trust, who do I turn to? And that's what I'll be getting with you, John, so we can make sure there's something in place to protect the people of Guam. And we want to make sure that when Art goes back to his office and we talk about Section 30 money on Bill 65 that was passed, on many occasions, and if you watch some of the bills that are passed by previous legislature and the current legislature, it's not a fix-all. And you know this, it doesn't fix the problem we're faced with. One of the biggest problems we have is we don't know who's doing business on Guam, really. We may go to Revenue and Tax and say, we got a list of businesses. I can tell you right now, you can go down to Tumon, and half of that, I would say a third of that population is not even registered. You go to the bed and breakfast program that was passed last year, 2 years ago. Is it functional? Is it collecting all the business? I'm going to tell you it's not. And most of you probably will agree with me. So that's really the heart of the bill, is to make sure everybody's registered. We want to protect the people. We want to protect your clients. That's the bottom line, really. Because I'm probably a client of one of them. And Flo brought that to me. Did I talk to my brother who deals in trusts? My father's chairman of the retirement fund. And that doesn't bother me at all. But if it talks about the people in general, because I'm going to see him in less than an hour. I'm says, are your trust funds for the Guam employee, are they registered in Guam? Can they honestly be protected that tomorrow if something was to fall, happen in the world, their trust is not lost because they're not on Guam? That's what I'd be concerned about. I mean, I live on Guam. I don't live in the States. If I was in the States, I worry about IRS. But I'm on Guam. It's a mirror. So we want to make it right. And I don't worry too much about IRS. And the reason why is because in the tax commission, we're going to figure out if we're going to delink or say link. Then we'll worry about the IRS. Then John probably says, wait a minute, we need to figure something out, right? But ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be an education process. This is not going to happen overnight. I need to feed more data into this bill or information. And maybe we'll come up with an amendment. I'll get with you, John, get with you, Mr. Clark. I'll get both Johns, John Joe, John, David John, and we'll figure this out. We just want to get it right, okay, Flo? It's not about one business. There should never be one business. That's why this current body voted to maintain, what's that, the 3 insurance? Now the government's saying, no, we shouldn't, because we're spending too much money. Sometimes having a choice is make sure you have the wallet to pay for it, okay? And I know, John, you know where I'm coming from. If you don't got the means to pay for it, you don't want to have a lot of choices. But when it deals in your trust, I like to be able to know where I can invest a little bit here, a little bit there, and everything. But I want to make sure I can turn to somebody, because if it was something John was running or the other John was running, I know I'm going to live a little bit longer. I'm going to come to you and say, what happened to my money? And you guys are going to have to answer it real quick. Because why? The trust is with you. Yeah, trust. Okay, does anybody else want to speak? If not, I know Flo was getting hungry. She wanted to talk. She ran back up the chair. Yes, Mr. Logan.
You know the mechanism of us getting from IRS? IRS is not what everybody thinks it is. They're not there all the time to be top-notch and perfect. When I was director, we found withholding taxes that was withheld from a federal government that wasn't paid to Guam. And that was $21 million. And then I think in 2013 or 2014, we found another one that wasn't paying over to Guam. And we got that money, and that was like $8 million. So the mechanism may be there in theory, but in practice, IRS, when they're looking for cover over, I believe this type of cover over, I think it's covered under 5074, which is filed with a tax return, and that tax return gets processed in IRS. Half the processing units in IRS does not know what a 5074 is. It's because it's for a territory, and it's very, very, very minimal. So if you're going to ask them to go look at the millions of filings that they have, to look for that 5074 in their tax return, very small. That's why we ask for a filing of what they filed with IRS, so we can reconcile what we have and ask IRS for it. But we didn't get it.
I'm not surprised. Mr. John, you wanted to say something. Go for it, sir.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Uncle Art. 2 things. Just we beg you, going forward, any type of legislation to the whole legislative body, any type of legislation, NAFA Marianas is available to consult on the ramifications, the implications. Will this be detrimental? Will this cause increase in fees? Is there a legal consequence? We're available, so our door's wide open to of course, rev and tax and to the legislature. Secondly, we do the filing process for the 1099-R and the 1096 on an annual basis to report those withholdings to, like Uncle Art said, is basically to get the reconciliation of the withholdings back to Guam where it rightfully belongs. So I just want to point that out. And thirdly, with the heavy, we're only talking about the legal and the tax. Investing for retirement and saving for retirement is difficult enough as it is for the investments. So there's very intricate web of federal regulations and agencies on top of that investment market risk. So our point is that the federal government, the SEC, the US DOL, ERISA, all of these federal government agencies and laws and regulations are already in place for Guam retirement savers protection. And no, there won't be where, hey, somebody's going to run off with the money, because the protection is there. I also want to point out that our companies, Flo's company, our company, and NAFA's companies, we are investment advisor firms, licensed as a firm, as entities with SEC and FINRA, and licensed as individuals with SEC and FINRA. And some individuals have multiple licenses as well, such as CFP, insurance licenses, et cetera. So the licensing, I think, Senator Attorney Espaldon, you can understand the significance of having that industry accreditation because it's important to do business with licensed providers. So I just want to make sure that this body, we recognize the significance of that, and our efforts are for the best interests of our clients, because we are personally liable as well as our businesses are liable. In retirement plans, those business owners that sponsor their retirement plans, the fiduciary rules state that those businesses as an entity and those individuals, let's say a CEO, a human resources, those individuals are personally liable for fiduciary responsibility to act in the best interests of the employees and their beneficiaries. That is the #1 ground zero rule of retirement plans, acting solely in the best interests of the employees and their beneficiaries. So that's where we get our best practices from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Joa. I will take you up on your offer and your firm, okay? Like I've reached out to both.
Look forward to
else.
it.
I don't think, Mr. Clark, also, you want to offer your support? I'm going to reach out to both of you, so.
Thank you, sir.
Go for it, sir. You want to say something? Yeah. Hopefully it's not to continue the hearing. I mean, I think the discussion's done. We pretty much know what's going on.
You have very reputable companies that are here in Guam that have gone above and beyond to make sure that they're providing the best service to their clients out here. And we know that those are the ones with integrity, and they want to be able to make sure that they are protecting their clients, the participants, and the assets that they've worked hard. They're talking about retirement money, right? So, and that's not something to take lightly. When you're trying to help somebody prepare for retirement. But the issue is, as you mentioned, and going back to Mr. Logan's point, is that there may and possibly be in the future those that are not willing or trying to deceive companies out here and participants out there with their money. Those are the ones that we have to watch out for. Those are the ones that we need to try to put in place regulations to protect them. And as you mentioned, that yes, these are IRS regulations that if you have an issue, you have to go before the IRS. But the laws here are governed by the Department of Revenue and Taxation, by the Department of Treasury here in Guam. So therefore, we need to make sure that we have laws in place and regulations in place so that the people here in Guam, the government of Guam, has the power and the tools and the ability to represent and protect the people here in Guam. Because they're not going to go before the IRS, they're going to go before the government of Guam and seeking support and help. So these laws need to be in place to make sure that we have the proper regulations and policies in place, so that if there are people out there who are not willing to do what's right for the people of Guam and who they're supposed to be watching out for their best interests, that Guam is going to be able to properly adjudicate those type of situations. Puerto Rico has done it. Other countries have done it. People that are from off island that, if they know that they have to do it and they realize that there's a business opportunity here, they will do it. Payroll companies is a perfect example, right? Payroll companies, if they want to be able to offer payroll services, and there are those that do from off island, they're willing to make sure that they follow the rules and are able to report taxes to the government of Guam. And so trust companies and other companies in the U.S. will have no problem. And like as I said, it's an opportunity for brokers and other investment companies to be able to get business from those that aren't doing that. An insurance company, if you want to look at the insurance industry, perfect example. When they made that law that says you have to have representation here, did that hurt the insurance industry? No, it did not. It helped them. You had more opportunity and more people that were willing to go into the insurance industry as a result of that. So I think it's good for our island, and it's good for the people that are saving for retirement and work here in Guam. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that completes all the testimony. The committee will continue to receive testimonies for the next few days, or maybe even just a little bit longer until I get with the two Johns and then everybody else, and we just trying to work it out, because I got to watch out for revenue and tax. They're the only one that's going to end up. Mr. R is probably going to ask me, says, can you give us more positions so we can go after what we need, what you guys are talking about? But we will continue to receive testimonies for a few more days. Please provide us a copy of your testimonies you've written, and Flo, write one up, or I'm going to call my brother and tell him to call you to ask you to write one up, because you're good friends with John. And please address your written testimony to the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com. My office is located at the Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam, 96931. Si Jus Marcy for your attendance and participating in today's hearing, and for those at home, thank you for watching. It is now 2:58, and you all have a nice day.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.